Movies begin with a shirtless Frank Castle, bearded, moving in slow motion past his murder wall. The place where he connects information and builds his case, not a literal wall of killing. The image is ritualistic and heavy rather than decorative. He then grips a chin-up bar with blood still on his hands and forces himself through pull-ups while screaming through the effort. He pushes into the 40s before his body and mind begin to collapse together. He drinks heavily, takes pills without hesitation, and then ends up vomiting into a bucket. Frank Castle has never been someone who avoids turning emotion into physical punishment. That tendency continues when he turns toward a mirror and punches it, breaking his reflection into fragments. The screaming continues as he rips down every clip note and photograph from his wall. Everything he has been trying to hold together falls apart in his hands. After destroying it completely, he immediately begins rebuilding it again from the start, as if he cannot escape the cycle. We then move into a news report that is not the BB report. Violence has broken out in Little Sicily. An unhoused man walks through the street with a small dog, singing quietly as he goes. He casually comments that there are no Cadillacs left around anymore, and says the Nucci gorillas are gone. For most viewers, this is unclear, but it signals something important for those familiar with the background. The Nucci crime family has been eliminated, and Frank Castle is responsible. That moment of background calm does not last. A group of thugs approaches and takes the man's dog named Camo. During the chaos, one of them nearly gets hit by a garbage truck. The dog is not so lucky. Camo is run over and killed. The unhoused man collapses in grief and screams, completely broken by what he has witnessed. We cut back to Frank, who is now alone in a stripped-down room and mentally unraveling. He mutters to himself about being a reconnaissance Marine, repeating it like an identity he cannot escape. His mind begins producing visions of his former life. Old military companions appear along with Curtis High. Frank spirals further and begins cutting into his own chest while screaming in pain and frustration. Curtis appears as a hallucination, telling him to speak and reach out. Frank finally admits that he needs help. He gathers his things and leaves behind everything connected to his old identity as Marine and Punisher. Weapons and reminders of violence are abandoned without ceremony. He steps outside wearing a hoodie and is briefly seen by a neighbor in a busy neighborhood. Frank then enters a diner run by Andre. He orders coffee while the outside world continues to collapse. A television inside confirms that the Nucci crime family has been wiped out. Outside the diner, chaos spreads through the streets. People are screaming, fighting, and panicking. Despite all of it, Frank simply walks through without reacting. He does not acknowledge the violence or the fear around him. It is as if he has become detached from everything. He moves through it like it is not there. The sound design shifts and begins blending into war memories. Helicopters and gunfire replace the city noise as Frank continues forward. Eventually, he reaches the graves of his wife, Maria Elizabeth Castle, and his children who were killed in a mob crossfire. He speaks to Maria and reminds her of his promise that he would never quit. He then admits that he is exhausted and has nothing left to give. He raises a gun to his head. As he does, he imagines his children again. His daughter asks him to come play upstairs. His son appears near a pool. He also recalls earlier fragments of their life, including the strange book he once fixated on. The memories then shift into something darker. His family appears wounded and screaming as they relive their deaths again. The visions twist into suffering and loss. At the graveyard, his daughter suddenly appears in front of him in reality. She asks if he is okay. Before he can respond, she disappears without explanation. Frank is left confused and desperate, insisting she was there. He spirals as he breaks down, trying to hold on to something that is already gone. We return to the street where Curtis appears again as a hallucination. He mocks Frank and questions what he has left to do now. He asks what his purpose is supposed to be. With the Nuccis gone, the last major group tied to his family's death is gone as well. It feels like his mission is over. Frank continues walking through the city, passing school buses. He suddenly sees another version of himself wearing the Punisher uniform walking toward him. The moment represents an internal split in who he is becoming. Then Minucci appears. She tells Frank she needs him. She explains that her own family has been destroyed just like his. She speaks about a hunger that never leaves, something that keeps you moving even after everything is gone. She begins recounting her family's deaths one by one. Her husband Benny dies first, shot in the head by the pool while he is with other women. Her oldest son, Bobby, is next. She calls him a good policeman while describing his brutal death during a sexual encounter that ends with his throat being cut from behind. Then Eddie Jr. arrives at Nucci's restaurant and is gunned down along with his guards. She continues with Carlo, her youngest and most favored. She calls him her prince and refuses to believe the accusations about him. He is killed as well. She then suggests Frank may be the one responsible for all of it. "You are like a hungry, avarice animal," Minucci says as she rises, revealing the truth that the Punisher is responsible for wiping out her entire family. "You took everything I had. I love you, Mom," Carlos says in a memory as Frank crushes his skull under his foot. Magnucci reminds Frank that he simply forgot about her. She spits in his face and tells him she has already set everything in motion. A bounty has been placed on him. And at 6:47 p.m., the exact time Carlo died, every thug in the neighborhood will be sent into his building to kill him and destroy everything in their path. "I'm the one who's doing the punishing now," she says as she leaves, rolling away with satisfaction, ready to watch Frank die, or at least see him try to survive what feels like a full assault straight out of a war zone film. Upstairs, Frank is visited by another vision. Karen Page appears. She is alive in reality, but not truly present in this moment. She tells Frank that the man he was, the family man version of Frank Castle, was only a mask. She says this with understanding, as if she knows what masks really mean. Frank asks if she is really there, and if she is with him. The moment ends as the attack begins. Frank hears chaos outside the hallway as the thugs lose control, behaving more wildly than any obsession around him. They break into the apartment across the way and pour gasoline at Frank's door. The fuel is lit and the building is engulfed in fire. Frank screams as well and then moves forward. Frank storms into the opposing apartment and begins killing the attackers with brutal force. He stabs men in the throat, breaks arms, and fights back against baseball bats with raw strength. One attacker arrives with an axe and accidentally kills one of his own men in the chaos. Another thug foolishly hands Frank a shotgun, which he uses to kill several enemies in rapid succession. The violence escalates until an explosive device detonates in the hallway. At this point, the fighting becomes overwhelming in scale. Frank pushes further into the building, and the entire apartment complex is now under siege. He moves outside and takes control of the situation, grabbing more weapons and firing across balconies. He throws enemies off railings and shoots with precise focus. Any hesitation he had earlier in the episode is gone completely. Innocent people being attacked has removed all restraint. Frank continues climbing through the building, fighting his way toward the roof while leaving destruction behind him. Along the way, he encounters more attackers dressed like leftover militia from chaos scenarios. He fights them one by one, eliminating them as he advances. At one point, he is thrown off onto an air conditioning unit, but still manages to kill his attacker even as he falls. From that position, he sees Magnucci watching everything from below. He drops through scaffolding and debris and continues fighting down toward the street. The city around him is collapsing into full disorder. He sees Andre struggling and Charlie in danger. At the same time, Magnucci is being evacuated. Frank is forced into a decision between pursuing revenge or saving the child. He chooses to save Charlie. The music shifts as Hatebreed plays and Frank enters the diner in full force. He opens fire and attacks with whatever he can grab. One enemy is taken down with a blunt object, another with a coffee pot, and the last with a blade to the neck. The fight is fast and chaotic and brutal. It does not end there. A large, heavily tattooed man enters and begins overpowering Frank. He starts choking him, but Frank responds by stabbing him repeatedly until he finally drops. The room is cleared. Frank sees that Charlie is safe. Andre arrives with his wife and breaks down in relief. For a moment, everything settles and the violence pauses. Charlie gives Frank a handmade paper flower. It is a small gesture of gratitude in the aftermath of destruction. Frank leaves the diner and walks into the street, thinking through everything that happened. Minucci has escaped, but he does not immediately pursue her. Instead, he returns to the graves of his family in Brooklyn. He believes they were with him during the fight. He speaks to them and decides to continue forward. He feels some sense of closure, or at least survival. He repeats his old mantra as he looks at the graveyard, speaking about batches and cycles, about continuing no matter what, as if trying to convince himself to keep going. The moment feels unstable and almost surreal. The final scene shifts again to the streets where a couple is walking and talking about travel. They are suddenly targeted by the man responsible for killing Camo earlier. Frank appears again, now fully back in Punisher gear with a cleaned appearance and renewed focus. He intervenes, returning a stolen item to the unhoused man from earlier, then knocks the attacker down and shoots him directly into the camera. The Punisher is fully back in action.